Good afternoon, good evening. My name is KARIEM. Welcome to The Spot. Got my co-host Damian Ware here.
Good afternoon, good evening.
Dame, what's going on, man? We got, this has not been fun with this subject that we got here.
Very touchy subject.
Very touchy subject. A lot of people, we're talking about Israel and Palestine. What's going on? That's heating up. It's really heating up.
Definitely.
So, we want to go into that. It's funny because I've had so many people just touching base with people over the course of the last couple of weeks. And when I tell people that we're covering this subject, you've been getting that too?
Oh, yeah.
When I tell people we covering this subject, they're like, man, I'm not sure if you really want to deal with that. But then we'll have that conversation going. We'll start getting into the conversation and everybody's engaged in the conversation.
Take off into it, yep.
So I'm like, how can we not really cover it? Because one of the things that I'm finding out is that as I talk to people about it, they know very little of the details. Like they facts is like way all over the place.
Right.
There's real extreme generalizations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man, they've been fighting for thousands of years and okay, so what did that mean?
Right.
And they don't really know what that means. You just say it.
Or
like,
why.
They don't say why.
Yeah.
Nobody really has a information-based opinion on how they even feel about that situation and scenario.
Right.
So, hey man, we might as well dive on into it. You know what I'm saying? We for everybody out there, we appreciate you watching, tuning in. We want to like, subscribe, and share this video. Real shout out. We want to go ahead and get this out the way because it's going to be tough here today. So we want to go ahead and give a shout out to our sponsor, Upper Room Apparel, and we coming up on Black Friday. So for all of our Black Friday coming up, it's crazy. Thanksgiving is next week.
Yeah.
So we want to give a promo code to everybody who's shopping. First of all, we want to appreciate everybody that's been supporting us all the year, and we want to give a promo code. Buy Black, all one word, Buy Black. We encouraging the support of Black businesses, you know what I'm saying? So put Buy Black in at checkout and get an extra 20% on top of the discounts that's already on for Black Friday. Yeah. So, hey, you know what I'm saying? For the people that is checking us out and watching, we want to give them a little something extra. So, Upper Room Apparel. And so why is this such a hot topic, Dane?
As far as like the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, I think what you got going with this whole thing is that you got what the news has given us for as long as you can remember in terms of the conflict of the two nations or the two groups of people over land. I think you got a lot of religious and a lot of biblical, a lot of religious conversations that intersect with this whole situation. I think that's kind of like the main culprit for how this whole thing get thrown off, though. That's
really because when how can I say this? It's like when you kind of go towards the Bible, it gets real muddy.
Yeah.
It gets real muddy because now you're dealing with a lot of stuff that's not really, it's kind of stuff that you've been taught, but you can't really prove it.
Right.
I think for the sake of this conversation, man, we might want to.
We just need to stick with the facts.
Steer clear of the book, and then let people just take the fact. You can take the facts, and then you can take them, back to whoever you get your insight from on a biblical, religious standpoint, and then kind of shove things out. But what we want to do is we want to deal with what is the facts as it relates to what's going on in that part of the world? Whose land is it? Who deserves? Who is the quote unquote real Jews? Are there real Jews? Are there fake Jews? Are people stealing the land? Are people? We want to deal with this because that's what people are saying. Okay, the Palestinians are saying, "Hey, y'all stealing our land." Jews are saying, "Man, we've been here.
This is our land.
This is our land. We have just as right to the land." And what do you know about that? What do you know about the history of the Jews? How far do they go back in that part of the world?
As far as like what I have been able to come up with, I mean, you can trace back in recorded history, you going back to like 70 AD.
Right. The Romans, right?
The Romans, yeah. The Romans came in. The fall of Jerusalem, Romans came in, Roman Empire took over, went on ahead with their program and kind of took over the land, enslaved people, and also they said they ran people out.
Okay, because the Romans, when they took over that part of the world, when they invaded, they took over. Now you got the Greeks, right? The Greeks controlled it at first.
Right.
The Persians took over from the Greeks. The Romans took over from the Persians. We basically talking about colonialism. We talking about, I think in order to be able to really understand this thing, we gotta define it in the context of good old fashioned colonialism. The business of the day was, we coming into your land.
Right.
We're taking your stuff and you gotta go.
That's what we dealing with.
That's what we dealing with. It's no different than people who settled America.
Right.
Came in. They were Native Americans here. Yo, we need this. Y'all gotta go.
Right. Is it similar to like what you had in terms of the South African apartheid situation? Because we see how that ended. Is it similar though?
Now, similar in what way? Like, what are you saying that when you look at apartheid in South Africa, what do you look at that? Because you got the same usual suspects that was present. I think it was the British that came in.
Colonized.
They colonized it, and then they put the minority in the position of authority. You understand what I'm talking about, the two groups.
The two groups.
Now, they took the groups that were the lighter ones that had the relationship with the British. They took them and they put them in a position of authority. They were maybe a little bit more cultured, refined, a little bit more educated, but they had a better relationship. The darker ones were a little bit more living on the earth and that type of thing. They let them rule. And then when they backed out, when the British backed out, they was like, okay, y'all on y'all own. And so what was the majority underclass rose up and start killing the minority, which was the top class, the ruling class. So to me, that kind of, in that way, super similar. Because when they came in, let's start from a position of, Palestine.
Okay.
Definition of Palestine. Palestine is not even a Muslim or an Arabic name, right?
Wow. Okay, touch
on that. You familiar with that? Now, Palestine, when Rome took over, right? The cat that was over Rome, he was like, okay, we want to establish and rename. We want to break the tie.
Right.
Now, this is 70 AD.
70 AD.
Because when a lot of people talk about the fact that the Israelis or the Jews don't have no connection to the land, they talking about 1945. We talking about 70 AD, where the Romans came in. At that time, it was two areas, right? Samaria, Judea and Samaria, right? So Judea, that was the connection the Jews had. That name came from that. He changed the name after the Philistines, Palestina. That's where the Philistines came from. And Palestina that was where the name Palestine came from. It's a Roman name that the Philistines was the enemy of the Jews. They was the most fierce enemy of the Jews, and this Roman emperor renamed that territory after their enemy, after he took that land. Yeah, after the Philistines, after
David
he took
and
that
Goliath.
land from them. David and Goliath, Samson and Delilah.
Yeah.
You know, Samson was a Jew.
He was a Jew. He was a Hebrew.
Delilah was a Philistine.
Yeah. Goliath was a Philistine.
Yeah. And David was a Jew. Right? So that war, that battle has kind of been going on for as long as we can remember. And that's even, that's probably as much as we can get into on the biblical side of it, but it just shows how far them cats go back. And the question is kind of like, how is this relevant today? Because that's the question that I get all the time. But I was looking, I'm not sure if anybody was paying attention to it, but on the 28th of October, the cat that's the Prince of Saudi Arabia, he made a call to the guy that was the president of Iran. Now, the United States has been able to maintain balance or power in the Middle East by keeping them two cats divided and at each other's throats.
Right.
Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran is the enemy. Saudi Arabia, we're cool with Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So we have a special relationship between the Saudis. We provide them military protection.
Right.
And they keep our economy stable. So whenever the economy slows down or when unemployment goes up, they buy weapons. So they'll come in and say, all right, well, y'all stuff is slowing down. Give us $2 billion, $3 billion worth of weapons. It creates jobs, gets the economy back moving again. That right there is strong when it comes to the United States and having that whole system with Saudi Arabia. And then on top of it, like we talked about before, they have the petrodollar, which they keep America strong because they run that petrodollar. In order for you to buy oil in the Middle East, you have to use U.S. dollars. So that also keeps the U.S. dollar circulating, and it keeps the U.S. dollar present in every other country in the world, which solidifies us being the world reserve currency.
Right.
So there's a good relationship that we got with the Saudis. And the key to keeping that relationship is to keep them enemies with Iran. First time just about ever that the Prince of Saudi Arabia called the president of Iran. That was on the 28th of October. The very next day, he puts a call in to your boy Joe.
Stumbling Joe.
Sleepy Joe, right? And he puts the call in to Joe, and he tells Joe, look, either y'all deal with this situation with Israel.
Right.
This was after the bombing and all of that. Right. Either y'all deal with that situation in Israel, or we're going to have to take some action.
I seen that.
Now, that has never happened.
Right.
They never even take that posture with the United States.
Right.
This is the first time ever that they've taken that posture with the United States.
Yep.
What does that tell you?
That tell you that I think from what I'm looking at, the support is eroding, for one, with the whole Israeli thing, and that, it's just something else going on here.
The shift of the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East is changing.
Yeah.
It's changing because I was looking at that, and so, all right, you got the situation. I think it was Iran. Iran came out and said, if Israel is talking about they going in, if Israel going in, we going in too. So now Saudi Arabia and Israel, they on the same page. Whatever they talked about on the phone, they got on the same page, because you ain't going to say that to the United States and you ain't got no backup. I think my personal opinion is that when they had that conversation, Iran said, okay, if y'all go in, we got you.
Right.
Lebanon and Syria said, okay, if they go in, we going in too. So you got Lebanon, you got Syria, you got Iran, you got Saudi Arabia, all saying that if Israel goes in, they going in too. The United States, at that point, they got a counter. They got it countered.
Right.
Now, back up. As soon as the thing jumped off, you had at this point they hadn't confirmed it,
right.
but they pretty sure that your boy Putin sent some troops over to the Middle East as well.
Right.
So
he
troops
distraction.
He sends into the Middle East, and then China also sent warships into the Middle East. They didn't even lie about it. They lied about why they was going, but they didn't lie that they was going. They said, okay, well, we sent some in there, but this is just a routine exercise that we do every 25 years or so.
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I'm saying?
A little bit of war games.
Yeah. We just
pump faking. Okay.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting because I'm like, these are the same people that was present in World War II. Mm-hmm. These are the same
players.
The same players that was in World War II. So we might think that this thing ain't really big enough to touch us,
right?
But I think it's a little bit bigger than what we think.
I think so too.
We're not really paying attention to it on the ground the way that we should. But I think that it's something that's really major. It could reach out and touch us.
Yeah, because it got some World War undertones to it.
Okay.
In terms of the nations that you got involved, you got the United Nations. You got they calling shots, but that ain't none of that had any effect throughout this whole conflict.
With the United Nations?
With the United Nations, any of the solutions that have come up, we talk about these 2-state solutions and stuff, none of that has really had any effect. You go back, you're talking about all these, it's like a list of different solutions that the United Nations, the Palestinians and the...
Going all the way back to the League of Nations.
Going all the way back.
Yeah.
We got solution after solution. Peel Commission Report, 1937.
Okay.
UN Partition Plan, 1947. Resolution 242, 1967. You got PLO acceptance of 2-state solutions in the 1970s. You're going way back and you come way forward. And the United Nations have been governing this whole thing. When you talk about the United Nations, you're talking about they also made up of those 5 core companies or 5 core countries: United States, Russia, China, I think it's United Kingdom and France.
Right.
Those are the major players that call shots in the United Nations. So when you say that this thing been in the hands of the United Nations all this time and we have had no solution whatsoever, and then you go to talking about World War and the players that we got involved, it's the same players.
Well, the thing about it is that the United Nations role is just to give a recommendation. The United States, or the United Nations, did I say United States?
Yeah, United Nations.
We're talking about the United Nations.
Right.
The United Nations role is just to give a recommendation. Their role isn't to solve the problem. So the recommendation, in order for it to turn into a treaty, both sides have to agree to the recommendation. That's the part that they haven't been able to get.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with, which most people think, okay, this is between the Palestinians and the Jews.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's as simple as that. You got the players that's present here. You got the Jews. You got the Palestinians or the Arabs, because they never referred, the legal documentation never even acknowledged any people called Palestinians. They was talking about breaking it in between a Jewish state or Israeli state and an Arab state. They never acknowledged them as Palestinians because there was no country called Palestine. These were people who migrated out of the desert, coming from across the Arabian desert. These is all people who kind of migrated into that area. They were like gypsies and all these type of people that kind of migrated. You had Muslims, you had Christians, you had Jews, you had all these people who kind of was in this little area. So I'm not sure if we really understand it and really break it down. You're talking about Arabs, and you're talking about Jews, but the Arabs the Jews aren't just Jews.
No.
It's a little bit more. The Arabs, they have tribes So it's not as complicated as to just throw them into a basket and say, these are the Arabs. No, those Arabs have tribes, and each one of those tribes have very different approaches to how they live, how they communicate, how they socialize, how they connect with, how they do business. And then you have the Jews. The Jews are also not
one whole
group.
No.
You got Sephardic Jews, right? Those are the ones that kind of, as they was cast out of Rome, right? Out of Jerusalem from Rome. The Romans they put them out. Them cats migrated all over.
Right.
You had some that stayed kind of like in the Middle East across the desert, going back into Iraq, Iran, India, China, Africa, North Africa, that type of thing.
Right.
Those people were considered the Mizrahi, I believe, Mizrahi Jews. Then you had some that went up into Spain.
Right.
They settled there. Those were the Sephardic Jews.
Right.
Both of those groups are a little bit more religious. And then you had the ones that were in Europe, which were like Russia, Germany, Poland.
Ashkenazi.
Those are your Ashkenazi Jews.
Right.
So when you really look at it, the three players, you're talking about Jews, Arabs, and then Zionists.
Zionists.
See, that's the word that you can't.
See,
it's hard to.
Yeah.
Talk about the Zionists. Talk about the Arabs. What do you know about these three groups that distinguish them from one another that really plays a role into what's going on right now?
Right. So you like you said, you got different groups of people. You had the Jew, you had which we deal with the origins of Judaism. That's Jew.
Right. You
had Falshan Jews, you had Ethiopia Jews, you had Jews that had been in Nigeria, Jews that was, driven into other parts of Africa and everywhere. But then when you think of what we think of as the modern Israeli Jews, we don't typically talk about the Zionists. So you got to go into Zionism. Zionism basically is a political and ideological movement that basically emerged in the late 19th century. It's basically advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the historic region of Palestine. The history of Zionism can be summarized as follows. You got the early roots. When you talk about the early roots, you got the idea of returning to the Jewish homeland, Zion, which had deep historical and religious roots within Judaism. And then you had the Zionist movement, which began to take shape in the 19th century, which was influenced by various factors, including rising anti-Semitism in Europe.
Okay.
And so then within that political party, which that's what it started out as a movement and a political party, you had some major players. You had your boy, Theodore Herzl. You had events that came about, the Balfour Declaration, the British Mandate. All of these things were parts of that movement of the Zionists to establish a homeland for the European Jews.
Okay, and so now, if I'm not mistaken, you talked about the Balfour Declaration. That was, what was his name? Alfred or something?
Yeah.
Alfred?
That was Alfred Balfour.
He was a Christian Zionist.
Yeah.
He was a Christian Zionist. So is there any connection between the Zionists? I know that from what I had seen, the Jewish Zionists kind of spawned out of and got a lot of support from the Christian Zionists. They really bought into the idea that they was fulfilling prophecy by helping the Jews, Israel, establish Israel as a homeland of their own.
Yeah, and you say Christian Zionists, but you got to go ahead and make it clear for the people. We talking about the evangelicals.
Yeah, that's like, okay, because in the United States, there's a separation of church and state. So in order to be able to function politically as a religious organization, you can't come like a church.
Right.
You just can't say Christian Zionists.
Right.
You can't say that.
You can't
so
say it.
if I package myself up as evangelicals,
now we getting into
now I can get some work done. Now I can get some things done.
Wow.
You look at being able to put together a program. That's okay. We coming up into the Zionists, creating the Zionist movement.
Right.
Balfour. What was the Balfour Declaration?
So the Balfour Declaration you got during World War I. The British government issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917.
Right.
And it was expressing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Mm-hmm. It marked a significant step in gaining international recognition for the Zionist cause. And now you, like you said, you mentioned you had your boy Arthur Balfour. He was involved in that, and so he was the British Foreign Secretary at the time.
Okay, so while they working on see, this is the interesting thing, because now the Zionists, they were still Jewish,
right?
But and this is the way that I get it, and if there's anybody who got a little bit more insight on it, but it's pretty much been documented that the Zionists pretty much said, okay, we are more of this God of Moses cat, right? Mm-hmm. That we've been rocking with for the last.
Right.
He's not real, or he didn't forsaken us.
Right.
Either he's not real,
or he didn't
forsaken us. So what we're going to do is we're going to take matters into our own hands.
Wow.
And we're going to develop this Zionist organization. Mm-hmm. And that Zionist organization will allow us to be able to, is our ability to be able to do things outside the boundaries of religion.
Right.
Where we're not restricted by the law of Moses.
Wow. That's heavy.
Wow.
If you go into, and that's heavy. And these cats, man, listen, people can say what they want to say about these cats, the Zionists.
Yeah.
This thing, we going back to late, 1896?
1890.
Your boy Theodore Herzl first started forming this whole ideology.
Right.
This was a well-calculated, well-planned out movement. You talk about them lining everything up with Jew and Judaism. Like right here, you got the origin of Judaism. The origins are in the Middle East,
right?
Not in Europe.
Right.
It's one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. Mm-hmm. However, you talk about how it gradually spread throughout the Mediterranean and other regions through the Jewish diaspora, and then you got with the Jewish communities established in various parts of the world, including Europe. Mm-hmm. So you got this group that took on the ideology or the image or whatever have you, the brand of the Jews, of Judaism, and then came up with a whole movement, which was a political movement, the whole Zionist thing, and then partnered it with religion and scripture.
They used to refer to them as the Jewish enterprise. The Jewish enterprise. And what they would do is they said, okay, what we're going to do is, because you got these cats over here, everybody's playing the same game. Everybody's playing the same game but us.
Right.
Everybody's on this colonialism game. For individuals who not really hip to colonialism. Let's define colonialism for these cats.
This is where we going with
this. Is crazy. Okay, so colonialism. Okay, what we're talking about specifically is not colonialism as in we just going to jump off the ship, get on like Private Ryan, coming in, and no. This is a special type of colonialism which they refer to as settler colonialism.
Oh.
Settler colonialism, the definition is a system of oppression based on genocide and colonialism that aims to displace a population of a nation, oftentimes indigenous people, and replace it with a new settler population. That's what we did to the Indians here in North America.
You said remove A group of indigenous.
You got to
people.
get rid of this is here.
Yeah.
You can't establish a settler colonial state from a settler colonial's perspective if the indigenous native population is there. You must eliminate the indigenous population.
Wow.
So you can't have the United States of America and there's all these Indians around and they're the majority population.
Nah. They got to go.
So what you do is you move in amongst them and then you start to expand. I'm going to settle in, then I'm going to expand. And as I expand, I push you out.
Right.
So settler colonialism, this was the game that was being played back in them times. This ain't like 2023 where, oh man, that ain't right. You just gonna take them people's stuff that ain't right. No, this was the game that was being played back then.
Divide and conquer.
You can say, oh man, that was wrong what they did, but based on the rules that was being played, they said, you know what? Everybody we're being ran out of here.
Right.
The Romans ran us out of here. The India ran us out of here.
Right.
And then now the Germans are running us out of here. In Spain, we're being ran out of there. The idea of Zionism came out of, you know what? Why we keep getting ran out of everybody else's spot?
Right.
Why don't we just go home? Then we can set up a place that we can defend and we ain't got to worry about nobody running us out because we home.
It's ours.
That's the idea behind it. So what they did was they said that about 80% of the Jews that was leaving out of Germany, that was leaving and going, spreading, about 80% of them came to the United States.
Yep.
About 10% of them said, you know what? We're gonna go back home. We're gonna establish a land in the land of our forefathers, create a state. And the thing that was I thought so crazy is that they did, I don't want to say this, but they did what we almost aspire to do all the time. They worked together to say, okay, we're going to create this Zionist organization,
right?
But it's a worldwide organization.
Wow.
So these Jews, this 10% is going to go back to Israel. But this 90% that's spread it out other places, we're going to go there and we're going to implant ourselves into their societies. We're going to make money and we're going to fund
this movement.
Wow,
yep.
We're going to fund the movement. So you had individuals as well as corporations that were Jewish or Zionist owned that was taking money, putting it into the pot, shipping it over there, and then they would take it because at that time the Ottoman Empire was the ones
that had the land.
They had taken over from the Romans, right?
Right.
They had taken over, if I'm not mistaken, they took over from the Romans.
Yeah.
They overthrew the Romans.
Empire,
So they had been ruling that land for over, what was it, around 600 years? It was a little under 600, maybe a little over. I want to say for some reason the year 620 years kind of sticks into my mind, but they had been over there for a long time.
Yeah, because you had like during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as part of the Zionist movement's efforts to establish the Jewish homeland in Palestine, various individuals and organizations actually purchased land from the Ottoman Empire, which at that time controlled the region at the time. And so you had some real notable figures. They had set up organization like the Jewish National Fund. You had some of them key players for all the boogeymen. I know the boogeymen people waiting. You had your boy Baron Edmund de Rothschild. He was a key financier. Right. But the thing that you, when you talk about that whole ordeal with the settler and removing the indigenous, removing the indigenous people, you go back to your boy Theodore Herzl.
Right.
He often, is referred to as the father of modern political Zionism.
Right. He wrote The Jewish State.
The Jewish State.
Wow.
In the pages of the Jewish State.
Yo.
Yeah. You gotta
Google that, download the PDF,
get that book and read it. Because you're going to see inside of that book a very elaborate plan that is playing out still till this day.
Yeah.
He talked about, I don't know if I can't remember if they termed it. I was reading the book as far as like the how they removed the indigenous people.
Right.
The plan was to get them all the way out of there.
Ooh.
That's been the plan.
No two-state solution.
No two-state solution.
One-state solution.
One state solution. We talking about, this was in the book in 1897 or late 1890s that he wrote that.
Yeah.
That was the plan the whole time. And so when you start reading that book, you start seeing the major players. You see everything that was set up. And they thought they planned to move back in and settle in phases. They sent the poorest or the most desperate first. Second, they was gonna send the people after them that would help become the working class,
right. Build
economy. The last phase to go is gonna be the wealthiest of the Jewish people.
Wow.
Go ahead, they so-called diaspora, which you got people. What did you say? 80% here in America.
Wow.
And you sent them pictures with the development of that land?
Yeah. See, the thing is, and we'll get into that when we talk about these war crimes.
Oh.
See, this is the thing, man. See, this is getting crazy.
We got war crimes?
Oh my God, man!
War crimes.
It's like you try to say, okay, well, we gonna handle this subject, but we gonna stay away from this.
You can't stay clean.
You can't. Hands is dirty.
This is dirty. Yeah.
Super hands is dirty. Okay, so all right, Turkish landlords. Let's step right there and then bring it all the way up until today. Okay. So the Ottoman Empire was corrupt. So.
Them cats was cold.
The thing is, them people was from Turkey.
Okay, yeah.
The reason that they was in that region was for financial purposes only. So it's almost like if you came to America, let's say if you was from Mexico, you came to America, you gonna make $1 million and then you gonna go home and you gonna just chill. That's what the Ottomans was doing. That's what the Turkish people was doing. So they would come into the Ottoman Empire. They would buy land, function as Turkish landlords, but the money was the motivator. They're trying to get a lick so that they can go back home, kick their feet up, and chill for the rest of their life.
Wow.
So
what a plan.
What the Zionists did, genius, man. It's awareness, right?
Yeah.
See, I don't want to make it seem like we just hyping these cats up. I'm not being funny about that.
Right.
Man. There's some awareness that's going on that's from a strategic military standpoint.
Yeah,
these cats was political. Man. These cats was leveraging stuff, they was functioning on a worldwide scale.
Yeah, man.
I used to say all the time when we say, we in Akron and that's north side, south side, east side, west side.
Right.
That's how we look at Akron.
Right.
When they look at the planet, north side, south side, east side, west side.
Yeah, the planet.
Or the planet.
Not this.
No, they're not talking about no. You're talking about geopolitical takeovers.
Yeah.
Real.
Yeah.
Okay, so what the Zionists did was they said, okay, we leveraging and we pooling resources from all over the planet. And then we go into these Turkish landlords, I see you got, how much of this land you own? Well, I own about 50 acres. Let me give you 800,000 for it.
Right.
800,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back then,
you serious? Okay, give it to me. 800,000. You can have it. Tell your friends about it. Tell them I'm looking for land.
Yeah.
So these cats was actually going in and they was buying it up from the Turkish landlords. So you could say that they taking something, but they ain't took nothing yet.
Purchase.
They're purchasing, and you got deeds to everything that you purchasing. You got some people. It's just like you go out here on the corner. You might have some young guys out there. They selling they little stuff on the block.
Right.
They might be selling on that block for 20 years.
Right.
But then somebody come and buy the corner store and tell them that they got to leave. What you gonna say? You can't say this is my block.
No.
We've been standing here for 20 years. Show us your paperwork, bro.
You ain't got it.
You ain't got no paperwork. So he got a deed to the land. The police is just going to look at it and say, well, who got the deed? You got the deed? All right, y'all got to go. Well, the Zionists, they was functioning, and it was business, man.
Right.
They was going in, they was buying up the land, buying up the land, buying up the land, corporations buying up the land, individuals buying up the land, organizations buying up the land. And they got to the point to where they say, okay, while we're buying up the land, we're also working on the political side of it, and that's where your Balfour Declaration came in. Because now you got Britain and France who's looking to invade the Ottoman Empire and take over the Ottoman Empire. Right. So what they did was they put a deal together. The Balfour Declaration was a deal that they struck with your boy Lord Rothschild. Mm-hmm. He struck the deal to say, you know what, I can help y'all win this war. Mm-hmm. But if I help y'all win the war, and then y'all got to give me this area right here, this land called Palestine, we want that for us.
We want that, right.
So the deal, this is an interesting thing. The deal, you talking about 1916, you got British, you got French, you got the Arabs. These are the players.
Right.
The British and the French promised the Arabs sovereignty and leadership over the Arabian Peninsula if they helped them defeat the Ottoman Empire. So now we got somebody on the inside, on the ground, that can help us attack from the ground.
Right.
We're going to use the Arabs. And then we promising them sovereignty, which is a land that they own, because, see, they ain't got no land.
No.
They just nomads.
Right.
They don't really have no land.
Right.
So we're going to promise them a land that they own, and then we're going to allow you to be able to rule as leaders over the whole Arabian Peninsula if y'all help us win. The Arabs, they agreed. They fought in the war. They helped them win. What they didn't know, that was more like a verbal agreement. It wasn't nothing written.
Nothing on paper.
Wasn't nothing on paper. What they didn't know is that the British and the French had an agreement of their own, right?
Right.
They called it the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Okay,
so they had already hooked up together, and they said, okay, we're going to divide the land between us.
Right.
The Arabs didn't know that this, and I'm going to read this directly because this is the quote from them. They said that they didn't know that it had been decided secretly between Britain and France that they would divide the area up between themselves. Britain would receive southern Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan. And France would receive southeast Turkey, northern Iraq, and Lebanon.
Wow.
So while the Arabs thought they were fighting the war to overthrow non-Arab Muslim rulers,
right,
they just basically replaced the non-Arab Muslim rulers with European colonial rulers.
European colonial rulers.
You still talking about colonization.
Colonialism, yep.
Colonialism. That's the brand that keeps popping its head up.
That's the brand.
And we, in 2023, is looking back on it, and we're really, you got to look at it through that lens.
Through that lens.
Or else you never really understand
right,
what's going on.
Right.
Like, this was the method of the day.
Right.
So British took over, they got that area. Now, here's the thing. They gotta, and chime in whenever you feel like it on this, but just to finish this point, the British, they are working with the Christian Zionists and the Jewish Zionists.
Right.
So they got a working relationship with them.
Yeah.
You didn't just hoodwink the Arabs, so you ain't got no working relationship with them.
Right, no.
So when it comes time that we done took and we done occupied the land, we done took it over, guess who we put in charge? Just like Rwanda. We take the Jewish Zionists
and put them in charge.
Less than 10% of the population.
Right.
But they the movers and shakers.
Yeah.
We'll put them in charge over 80% of Arab population.
And you talking about back at a time where they had the British mandate for Palestine.
Yes.
That lasted from like 1920 to 1948.
Right.
Involved various British officials and administrators. They was responsible for governing the region during that period. And you go into like some of the, you got, at that time, you got some of the key officials. You got your boy, name keep popping up, Arthur Balfour.
Yeah.
The Balfour Declaration.
Right.
You got who, we already said he was primary author of the document and played a central role in the development of the whole plan. They had this cat, David Lloyd George, who was the British Prime Minister during World War I. He supported the Balfour Declaration, and later he became a significant advocate for the Zionist cause. Then you got Lord Milner, this cat, Lord Alfred Milner, who was a British statesman and colonial administrator who was also influential in supporting the Balfour Declaration. And then you got your boy, Lord Rothschild, and his boy, Chaim Weizmann.
Okay.
Prominent Zionist leader, had a correspondence with Lord Walter Rothschild, a British Jewish peer. So Lord Rothschild's influence and support for Zionism, we know, was instrumental. And it was instrumental in the British government's decision to issue the Balfour Declaration.
Right.
So we not just talk, we talking about a very, very sophisticated plan, a chessboard. We ain't talking about no checker players.
No, that's the difference. The difference is that the Zionists was playing chess while the Arabs was playing checkers.
Are you about to get us turned off?
So, well, I'm just saying. Look, that's the difference.
It's the truth, though. It's
that's
the hardcore facts.
You ain't got no paperwork. They making you these promises. You believe in them. And to me, it boils down. We ain't even got involved with the United States yet. We're not even touching the United States yet.
No.
You're talking about Britain.
Right.
And Britain's exacerbating tensions between Arabs and Jews.
Yeah.
They the one that throwing the stone and hiding their hand.
Right.
It's the Brits. It's crazy how nobody mentions them in the conversation. When you look at everything that's going wrong in a situation,
right?
They the dude it's like every time something go wrong, they there.
They there.
Okay. The Zionists, who have been supported by the British government, they flourished under the British rule. When the British came in and colonized, put them in control, they blew up.
Ooh.
Now they buying more territory. Now they doing everything. They were only 10% of the population. It created resentment between Arabs and Jews because the Jews was perceived as agents of the Western powers, which is Britain. And they was put as wards over the Arab population.
Wow.
And so that started creating tensions to the point to where 1920s came, riots broke out.
Right.
So now you building up to war.
Right.
Riots is breaking out.
Right.
And that was the challenge with this whole situation, is because the Great Britain managing from the outside, they really couldn't keep these groups.
Right.
They kept on having these spats and these wars breaking out over time, and they just couldn't keep these people to the point to where they said, okay, we need to come to some type of solution. We need to come, and that's what the Peel Commission kind of kicked in. What do you know about, you mentioned that earlier, the Peel Commission?
The Peel Commission, I seen, basically I didn't get really in depth into the whole report, but I know that they had it was a report around 1937, and it was basically one of these, solutions, two-state solution plans or whatever that never, really happened.
It was a recommendation.
It was a recommendation.
Because back then it was the League of Nations.
Right.
The League of Nations was it was today's UN.
Okay.
And so the League of Nations with the Peel Commission, what they did was Great Britain said, okay, we need to find a solution. They put together the Peel Commission. The Royal Commission of Palestine is what the formal name of it was. The Royal Commission of Palestine.
Right.
And it was Britain's attempt to find a third party to come in, do an investigation, and find out what do y'all think is the best solution of how we can deal with this situation in Palestine.
Britain's attempt.
That was Britain's attempt. Britain is the one who put together the Peel Commission.
Yeah, okay.
So, Peel Commission met, leaders of both sides. This was in 1937, right? They met with leaders of both sides, and they submitted their recommendation. Recommendations of the Peel Commission, they said the Arabs would receive 80% of the territory. The Jews would get a little less than 18% of the territory. And then Great Britain would have to leave. Great Britain would leave the area. It wouldn't be a colony no more.
Right.
They would leave the area, and then they would retain Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and the corridor to the sea. They wanted, because that was a major trade route.
Major trade port.
Major trade
right.
route. And the whole point of them colonizing that area is because they wanted access to the trade routes and the oil.
Here we go.
The oil in the Middle East and the trade routes. That's what they wanted. So they suggested you get Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and the corridor to the sea.
Right.
Notice Jerusalem, though.
Yeah.
Why Jerusalem?
This is supposed to be the capital. I believe what I'm looking at, you got Jerusalem, which really is supposed to be like the holy city. You got multiple religions there, but Jerusalem got the most historical, geographically, it's got the most historic meanings.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So they wanted to retain that for themselves.
Yeah. And it may be some other reasons, because from what I understand, you got tunnels underneath.
Okay.
And we talking about trade, even right now up till today, you know, they call in Palestine an open air concentration camp of over 2 million Palestinian people. But one of the main, there was this army, this Marine, this officer, one of the main topics that he talked about, because he's speaking from a place of war, the science of war, was that the Palestinian people have no airport, no access to airports, no access to the ports. So you talking about trade in that port, that's major. Because y'all, no matter what solution we come up with,
we gonna control y'all.
Yeah, y'all ain't getting that.
Because nothing's coming into y'all. Y'all access to everything is at our approval. We're going to be able to tax it. We're going to be able to control it. It's just the same way that they got it now, is that there's nothing that goes in and out of there except it be controlled and approved by Israel.
Wow.
So the problem was the Arabs felt that the whole of Palestine belonged to them. They wasn't trying to hear no Bible.
Right.
They wasn't trying to hear no God told y'all that this was supposed to be y'all land. They ain't trying to hear none of that. So they felt that Palestine belonged to them, but at the same time, the Jews wanted a Holy Land, a Jewish state set aside for themselves.
Right.
So they could never really agree on anything. Whenever, like you talked about those compromises that they always came up with, they could never come to an agreement, which basically made them null and void.
Right.
A lot of people in history, they talk about, well, they gave this much to this person to this, and they decided that this was going to happen. None of that actually happened.
Right.
At this point, the only land that's owned by the Jews is land that they've purchased.
From the Ottomans.
From the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
Okay, so, and then now, since Great Britain is the one who's occupying the territory, now they purchasing land through them.
Right.
Okay, so they expanding out, purchasing land, and they're keeping it moving. Great Britain was like, we out.
Right.
We want to get out of this whole thing. It's too hard to be able to create a solution for these cats. So what we're going to do is we're going to get out of the business of colonizing this particular area. We got India that they had partitioned India, and they also was trying to partition this area. They was like, you know what, we out.
Right.
The World War they had fought in World War I. They was like, we beat up, we then took some hits. We can't afford to be able to keep this going. So they decided, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to bail out and we're going to hand over to the United Nations. Y'all fix this problem. We out. Okay. So when that happened, did you see what they called the white paper?
I seen that.
The white paper in 1939, Britain abandoned the Balfour Agreement.
Okay.
And they betrayed the Zionist enterprise.
Right.
They had came up, whereas they was talking about, in the beginning, they was talking about a two-state solution. Now, with the Arab revolt, because the Arabs is revolting. They got mad, they revolting, they tearing stuff up. And they saying, look, from 1937 to 1939, in the midst of preparations for war in Europe, British statements reinterpreted the promise of the Balfour Agreement that they made to the Zionists 2 decades earlier. They put restrictions on how many quotas on how many Jews could come to the state of Israel.
Oh.
They capped it off at 175,000. And they said anything over 175,000 had to be approved by the Arabs for them to continue to bring people in. So the Jews was like, well, wait a second, man. This ain't what we talked about.
Right.
They said on top of that, they put restrictions on settlements and land sales to the Jews. Okay, so our whole program, this is what the Jews are saying, our whole program is that we buying this place up. So they came and said, okay, well, we're going to put restrictions to where y'all can only buy so much land. Y'all can't buy no more land. And we're going to put restrictions on settlements that y'all set up. See, them settlements is key.
Right.
Because now if you're talking about, we talked about replacing the population.
Right. Moving them out.
We got to move y'all out and we got to import Jews.
Right.
So what they did was they came out and said the United States or the United Nations stepped in and said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to come to our agreement as to what should happen. The Arabs would get 45% of the land. And the Jews would get 55% of the land. That's what the United Nations
came up with.
They said, okay, well, we're going to divide it up like that because we have to accommodate for Jews that are immigrating into, that are coming back home. We got to create space for them. So and the Arabs was like, no, we didn't agree to giving them 18%. We sure ain't going to agree to giving them 55%.
Yeah, this solution ain't good.
This solution ain't getting it. So
I think that was around the time, too, you had the 1929 to 1949 period where you talked about that time where during the conflict where the British said, no, we done. The British was no longer cooperating. They went back on that Balfour, and then up popped these Zionist terrorist groups. Okay, now this is I gotta say this. Because all the way up to this time, I'm looking at the Zionists and I'm saying, man, they just playing the game. They just playing chess. Yeah. And they playing within the rules. Yeah. They just playing better than everybody else. But right there, at that point right there, because there was a period of time when Great Britain, who had their military present, they was occupying the territory. The Zionists had the protection of the British military. Right. There was a period of time where Britain announced that they was going to leave to the time that they left. Right. Where those militias that you're talking about, the Lehigh, the Irgun,
they start murdering.
They start murdering cats.
They start really getting rid of Palestinians. They start displacing Palestinians.
Yeah. And they blew up they bombed the hotel. British officials was in there.
Exacerbating tensions, man.
Yeah.
Exacerbating, yeah. So this is where people are saying, okay, when they start having the conversation of stolen land. Right. Because what they're saying is during that period right there, 50% of the land that y'all got, y'all got displacing us during that time. Right. That wasn't up under no purchase agreements. Right. That wasn't up under.
Wasn't no paperwork, but
wasn't no paperwork connected to those. Those are just, okay, we're going to try to, it was a land grab. Right. And we're going to try to grab as much land as we can up until the time that these cats leave, the Britons. Right. We're going to try to get as much land as we can. By the time in 1948, the war in 1948, by the time it ended, the Jews had 78% of the land in Palestine.
78%.
May 14, 1948, Britain withdraws their forces. The very next day, newly declared Israel state was immediately attacked by 5 Arab nations: Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. They wanted to make sure, now that y'all ain't got y'all big brother, we just gonna take y'all out because we can't beat y'all at the game.
Right.
We can't beat y'all at the game. We just gonna go ahead and get rid of y'all
right now.
Right now.
Wow.
That became known as the war, the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. It's interesting just to see how, to me, I don't know, man, I keep going back to it, is that Great Britain, it just seemed like they wasn't going to let that thing be right.
Nah.
You almost wonder whether, I don't even know if I can say that, because like you say, neither side really wants to share that land.
No.
The Arabs don't seem like, because they believe that this
land
is their land.
Because we was there.
We was there, but they feel like it's Muslim territory.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
So they don't, anything that gives even 1% of ownership to Israel for a land that they own, they're not having it.
That's where you get the jihad, you get the holy war, and that's what you got, you know what I'm saying, as far as their idea. And so, yeah, like you said, and it's like Great Britain, United States, major, the kings of colonization.
Well, they got to the point to where they got what they call the Nakba, N-A-Q-B-A. That was basically the mass eviction. Once Israel kind of really got in a position to where this is the first time they're in a position militarily, they're in a position of control. And they decided, okay, there's a philosophy that they have as far as setting up a democracy in that land, is that in order for them to function as a monopoly, they have to be the majority.
They gotta be the majority.
So in order for them to be the majority, when you got 80% of the people are Arab, you got to start getting rid of, you got to either start exiling or taking the lives of Arab people.
Yep.
So the Nakba, May 15th, 1948, mass eviction took place shortly after 1948 Palestine War, which displaced the majority of Palestinian Arabs. Israel occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip kicked in at that point. 78% of Palestine being declared Israel. These are major things that took place during that time. 78% of Palestine was declared Israel. The destruction of over 500 Palestinian villages by Israel armed forces, and expulsion and flight of 700,000 Palestinians. So this right here, that Nakba, that's where the language of y'all stole our land, that's when it starts to become real. Still going on. 19 years later, the fighting intensified again. You got the war in 1967. Now this was started with, there was rumors that, we're being surrounded.
Right.
Egypt and Syria with Jordan, which was the West Bank, what they call now the West Bank. All of them decided, you know what, we're gonna surround these cats and we're gonna take it out. Well, what they didn't realize, that Israel had put some weight into their military. So they was being surrounded by Egypt, which now we know is Gaza, and the Golan Heights, which is lower part of Syria.
Okay.
So they was surrounding them, and they reached out to Jordan and said, yo, don't get involved in this. We about to take these cats out. Don't get involved. They got involved anyway because they had a pact as far as being all Arab. They got involved anyway. They call it the 6 Days War. In 6 days, they took out the military in Egypt. They took out the military in Syria, and they took out Jordan's military. That caused them to occupy those areas. Gaza, which is in Egypt, Jordan, which used to be Samaria and Judah, now it's called Jordan, now what they refer to as the West Bank, and then northern Syria.
Yeah.
So those areas now, when you hear about the fighting that's going on, those places are occupied territory now.
Mm-hmm.
That's starting back in 1967.
Right.
They still living under occupation in those areas right now.
Right.
That's where the fighting is breaking out.
Yep.
700,000 people put out.
700,000 nomads.
So, now you got modern day situation.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Occupation, you talked about the settlements.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the settlements is interesting. There's one thing about war crimes. We talked about war crimes earlier. And this is where it kind of tilts in the United States. Okay, you got to step in.
Right.
Because now, if somebody else was doing this stuff, they would call them to the carpet on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the law, international law says that if you occupy a territory, the place that you occupy, you can't set up settlements in that territory.
Right.
So they have the areas that was supposed to be divided. You had some parts that was set aside to go to Israel or the Jews. You had some sides that was set aside to go to the Arabs. In the area that they got set aside for the Arabs, Israel is actually putting up settlements in those areas that's supposed to go to the Arabs. Mm. So a guy I heard explain it, he said, okay, it's just like if we buy a pizza and while we trying to decide how we gonna split the pizza, you steady eating slices.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. They're consuming, and this is what makes me, when you mention that it doesn't seem like even Israel, because the way that they've been playing it up to this point is Israel that's agreeing to the partitions.
Right.
And the Arabs keep saying no.
Right.
Mm-mm. But the way that they going about consuming that land while they're waiting for closure it seemed like you don't want to share that land at all either.
No, that's part of the plan. It's being worked out in phases, and I call it like a sophisticated sabotage.
Wow.
Because they falling out at the table about little small things. They getting this thing close to the finish line, every deal, and then all of a sudden it falls apart about some boundaries, some borders, and stuff like that. And all along it's been played like, the Palestinians won't agree with anything because they just want everything for themselves. Yeah. And it's like that's not what's happening. But like you said, in the meantime, we still eating these slices of pizza.
Yeah, we
while this thing stall out. Yeah,
chomping them down. Yeah. Man, look, this episode right here, man, is super long, and we ain't even touched the surface. I feel like we really skipped through it as far as trying to get through it, but it's just too much to cover.
It's way too much.
It's way too much to cover. So we may come back and revisit it. We might not. It's kind of messy. Neither side got clean hands.
No.
Neither side got clean hands.
Right.
So we'll see what we can put together on this, man, and see what happened. Watch the Middle East. Keep an eye on how America interacts with it. If you get a chance, look up Barack Obama. He was on the podcast the other day. And we'll put the link under here to where you can look at that, man. Barack don't seem like he's really supporting Israel.
Ooh. Not right now.
And him and Netanyahu wasn't really on the best of terms when he was president. So that gave me a whole new insight into what's going on right now with these.
Yep.
And what typically people feel about America is that we back Israel no matter what.
Right.
It's not necessarily the case.
That's not the case.
Hey man, I ain't even gonna ask you if you got anything else. We done with this one. We gonna stick a fork in it. And man, we out, and we'll catch up with y'all on the spot.
Peace.
Peace.